And good evening, New Mexico. It was just 3 months ago when state lawmakers approved 2 new gun control bills, and then Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed them into law. Well, tomorrow, both of those new laws go into effect all across New Mexico.
And we're talking about a ban on guns at polling places and also a mandatory 7-day waiting period for most gun sales. Both bills faced a whole lot of criticism in the Roundhouse.
And even more from everyday New Mexicans. Griffin Rushton spoke to a gun shop owner today who says it really feels like they're kind of on their own with these new laws, Griffin.
Yeah, especially that mandatory waiting period. He says he's reached out to the governor's office and the Department of Public Safety, hoping to get some guidance on how to uphold this new law, but he says it's been radio silent. Now, before we get into all that, let's quickly run through these 2 new gun control laws. The first is that ban on guns at polling places. You won't see much of a change tomorrow because the primary election is still 3 weeks away, but when it does come time to vote, you'll have to leave your gun at home or in the car. The new law restricts guns at in and around polling places, but there are exceptions for concealed carry holders and law enforcement. People will notice that mandatory 7-day waiting period tomorrow. According to the new law, gun sellers are required to hold newly purchased guns for 7 days before handing them over to customers. But there are, again, exceptions for concealed carry holders and sales between immediate family members. The Democratic state lawmakers behind the new law say the waiting period will allow for federally required background checks to be fully completed, and if they aren't, gun sellers must hold those guns for up to 20 days. But there's also an emotional component here.
It's really about creating a space of time so that someone that might have the impulse to commit suicide with a quick and easy method would have some time to think about it.
Now, New Mexico is far from the first state to implement a waiting period for gun sales, but the gun seller I talked to says it sure feels like it, and he's doing what he can to follow what he's calling a pretty vague law.
I expect a lot of name calling to the governor. I expect a lot of frustration.
Arnold Gallegos knows his customers will have a lot of questions about the state's new mandatory 7-day waiting period for gun sales, and he doesn't have the answers.
It doesn't really list a whole lot of anything for us as retailers on what we're supposed to do. It doesn't even address who is allowed to do the transfer at all. So we're kind of stuck in the dark.
One of his biggest questions is how to measure 7 days.
New Mexico state law says that a day starts at midnight to midnight. Well, does that mean that if you come in at 9:30 in the morning, that time doesn't start till midnight and we have to wait till midnight for the 7 days?
He says he's taken that question and many others to the governor's office and the Department of Public Safety, and
it's radio silence on there. Even on their webpage, it says that we cannot discuss this.
We did find this FAQ page on the Department of Public Safety's website, but there's not much more information than what's already in the law, and it says don't rely on it to comply with the new law. Gallegos says he's figuring it out on his own.
And I've actually created a new forum for us to track it, and we track the date and the time that it comes in. We track the date and the time when they're going to proceed. I may actually have to hire somebody else just to follow the tracking part of it.
And he still has to store all those newly purchased guns for 7 days.
I've actually had to get rid of some of my guns my long guns that I normally have here up on the wall that you see, because I'm not going to have the storage room even for my own inventory.
Even with all his unanswered questions, Gallegos says his team is ready for Wednesday.
We've already got a plan. We've already got a process in process that we're going through. So now it's to see how well it's going to work.
Now, Gallegos also questions how effective this new law is going to be at preventing violent crime and suicides. He says he already refuses to sell guns to people who raise those concerns, and that's only happened about a dozen times in his 13 years in business. He suspects, if anything, that this new law is actually just going to push more people to find guns on the black market, sidestepping any guardrails.
So you covered this bill quite a lot during the legislative session. Is there any data or research showing that these kind of laws do what they're designed to do?
Well, one study out there does estimate that waiting periods can lower suicide rates by 11%, and based on New Mexico data, that would equal about 32 lives saved. There is also moderate evidence out there that these waiting periods can reduce homicide rates as well.
Goes into effect tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. Griffin, thanks.